Hello and welcome to Jekyll and Hyde Annotates with me. We are now on chapter 3. Dr. Jekyll was quite at ease. Before I start to go into it, you might want to grab your copy of the text, a highlighter, a pen, and also a notepad so that you can jot down the key quotations and you can use them for revision when you are revising for your literature exam. If you'd like to pause it here and go and grab all of that and return back to me when you're ready. So I will make a start. A fortnight later, by excellent good fortune, the doctor gave one of his pleasant dinners to some 5 or 6 old cronies, all intelligent, reputable men, and all judges of good wine. So the intimate dinner party setting and the further intimacy of a private audience after the meal, that we'll see later on when it's just Utterson and Jekyll left behind, puts Utterson in a position to penetrate the air of mystery that has come to surround Dr. Jekyll. The description of Jekyll makes his connections to Hyde seem impossible because obviously he is surrounded by reputable men. So why is he friends with Hyde, who is described using animalistic imagery and dehumanized and found to be repugnant and really, really the opposite of respectable? It's important to note here, and there's quite a lot that I'm going to go through really quickly here, like many stories of Robert Louis Stevenson's era, so the Victorian period, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde shows a world dominated by men, and most of the featured characters in this novel are male. But through the male-oriented society, it's perhaps not only surprising for the time period, but all of the male men in the characters are single and bachelors as well. So we've got the impression that traditional family life is unexplored in the book. This gives the personal lives of Utterson, Jekyll and others a lonely and isolated feeling. They live alone, they visit each other and then depart, but even their social calls have something that feels official about them. It is implied that the social constructs for these men, who have to deal with money, law and science, may be taking them away from the communal traditions of family and friendship and perhaps even religion, so that these men must relate to each other in a different, distanced way rather than talking face to face. This is a really important note to make for those of you who are wanting to get a grade 9. This really goes into detail about Stevenson's views and why he wrote a novel that's basically just about men and what it shows about men who are obsessed with their professions and don't seem to have time to form familial bonds or close relationships. So let's continue to read. And Mr. Utterson so contrived that he remained behind after the others had departed. This was no new arrangement, but a thing that had befallen many scores of times. Where Utterson was liked, he was liked well. Hosts love to detain the dry lawyer. So he's described as a dry lawyer, meaning he doesn't drink, when the light-hearted and the loose-tongued had already their foot on the threshold. So he doesn't drink, therefore he doesn't let anything slip, and that's really important because it's something I'm going to allude to later on. They like to sit a while in his unobtrusive company, practising for solitude, sobering their minds in the man's rich silence after the expense and strain of gaiety. To this rule, Dr. Jekyll was no exception, and as he now sat on the opposite side of the fire, a large, well-made, smooth-faced man of 50, with something of a slyish cast perhaps, but every mark of capacity and kindness. So we have this recurrent imagery of Jekyll to describe him as a beautiful man, as a man with a smooth face, and we'll see more descriptions of him later on as well. And this is important because it contrasts really highly with the descriptions that were given of Hyde and how characters in Victorian novels are very much prejudiced against the way they look, so appearances seem to be really, really important, and it was very much important in the 19th century because if you looked a certain way, so if you were beautiful to look at, and there were certain things that made people think that people were beautiful in the Victorian era, which I'd like you to go and research in your own time, but we will be alluding to it later on in one of the chapters as well, that if you were beautiful, then that means that you had a beautiful inside, you had a beautiful soul. But if you were ugly, then it suggested that you were evil inside, that you were devilish. So this prejudice and this hypocrisy is something that runs through this novel. We've also got the description of Hyde, saying that despite him being beautiful and having a capacity and kindness about him, that he's also got a slyish cast. So this is oxymoronic in itself, and it links to the theme of secrecy. The fact that he's got something that's not quite right, that he's hiding. And remember that almost all of the characters we meet have this slyness to them, this side to them, which obviously links also to the duality of man, how everybody has a good side and a bad side. You could see by his looks that he cherished for Mr. Utterson a sincere and warm affection. So that they have a really close, good relationship, and they love one another really dearly. "I have been wanting to speak to you, Jekyll," began the latter. "You know that will of yours?" So this will that keeps coming up is really important, because the upper classes always had a will. This was very important to them, as they wanted their possessions to go to someone trustworthy and to be protected. So poverty was strife in Victorian England. So it was important that the money from the will went to the right hands and was protected by all means, because of the poverty that was strife in Victorian England, and therefore it emphasizes the importance of the will. A close observer might have gathered that the topic was distasteful, but the doctor carried it off gaily. "My poor Utterson," said he, "you are unfortunate in such a client. I never saw a man so distressed as you were by my will, unless it were the hide-bound pedant." So the hide-bound pedant is a narrow-minded and conventional way of thinking. "Lanyon, at what he called my scientific heresies. Oh, I know he's a good fellow, you needn't frown, an excellent fellow, and I always mean to see more of him, but a hide-bound pedant for all that, an ignorant, blatant pedant. I was never more disappointed in any man than Lanyon." So remember how Lanyon described his distaste and actually his fury towards Jekyll. Here we see a similar thing happening with Jekyll and his distaste and dislike of Lanyon. So Utterson sets up an opportunity to have a private, close moment with his friend Jekyll. Jekyll is obviously concerned that he is alienating his friends, but the details of the will and the meaning behind Lanyon's extreme criticisms remains entirely under the surface, so we're not told what actually happened between the two characters. He refuses to explain what is going on, but just talks about how he dislikes Lanyon, similarly to the way that Lanyon spoke about him. So none of them really let loose what exactly is happening, and Utterson doesn't seem to sort of ask about it either. Remember, we've discussed this as well in chapter 2. "You know, I never approved of it," pursued Utterson, ruthlessly disregarding the fresh topic. So he ruthlessly disregards this conversation about Lanyon, because remember, Lanyon is his friend, so he doesn't want to have a bad conversation about him. "My will? Yes, certainly, I know that," said the doctor, a trifle sharply. So this is really important, this adverb sharply that we're going to refer to in a moment. "You have told me so." "Well, I tell you so again," continued the lawyer. "I have been learning something of young Hyde." The large, handsome face of Dr. Jekyll grew pale to the very lips, and there came a blackness about his eyes. "I do not care to hear more," said he. "This is a matter I thought we had agreed to drop." So notice the description of Jekyll given here. These are really key quotations, so if you want to jot them down: large, handsome face, grew pale to the very lips, blackness about his eyes. Really, really key quotations. So the theme of the duality of man, with the handsome face in contrast to the blackness about his eyes, is seen, using this oxymoron. So Dr. Jekyll's repressed anger is coming through. So we've got the oxymoronic language used here to talk about his repressed anger. And then he says here, he speaks in a similar way to Hyde. So this mirrors the occasion when Utterson mentioned Dr. Jekyll's name to Mr. Hyde, and he reacted with a sudden snarl. The effect of each name on the other suggests a relationship deeper than the financial blackmail situation that Utterson has entertained so far. So Jekyll's appeal for silence accentuates the character's inability to share and confess, and we'll go into this in a tiny bit more detail in a moment. What I heard was abominable, said Utterson. It can make no change. You do not understand my position, returned the doctor with a certain incoherency of manner. I am painfully situated, Utterson. My position is a very strange one. It is one of those affairs that cannot be mended by talking. This is a strange turn of tone for Dr. Jekyll. It makes his intentions and his feelings seem even further from the surface. He says that he's in a difficult position, but his sympathy with Mr. Hyde also seems to restrain him. We've got the phrase painfully situated, which shows that he dislikes the situation that he's in. He's in a difficult situation. He also speaks politely to Mr. Utterson, which shows that he clearly respects him and looks up to him. And we get the impression that Mr. Utterson is liked because he's trustworthy, and because of his quiet nature he's very much liked by the more respectable people, because he won't let their secrets out. He doesn't drink, so he doesn't slip up. So remember what we mentioned earlier about all of the guests that were in the dinner party, how they all liked Utterson, and partly the reason was because he doesn't drink, therefore he doesn't slip up. And in the similar way, Jekyll seems to really like him as well, so we get the impression that maybe this is the reason. Jekyll, said Utterson, you know me. I am a man to be trusted. Make a clean breast of this in confidence, and I make no doubt I can get you out of it. My good Utterson, said the doctor, this is very good of you. This is downright good of you, and I cannot find words to thank you in. I believe you fully. I would trust you before any man alive, aye, before myself if I could make the choice, but indeed it isn't what you fancy. So Dr. Jekyll is trying to end the conversation as quickly as possible. Remember the adverb sharply that was used earlier, which suggests quickness. We've also got the theme of secrecy here. He's not even trusting the person who he says he would trust more than himself. This also relates to the contextual issues of the time. So the upper class were always trying to conceal their flaws and attempting to make themselves seem perfect. So we've got this idea mirrored here as well. It is not so bad as that, and just to put your good heart at rest, I will tell you one thing. The moment I choose, I can rid of Mr. Hyde. Now, this is something I'd really like you to think about and comment down below if you've got an answer for this. Why is this comment a dangerous comment for Dr. Jekyll to make? Why is it particularly dangerous, do you think? I give you my hand upon that, and I thank you again and again, and I will just add one little word, Utterson, that I'm sure you'll take in good part. This is a private matter, and I beg you to let it sleep. So the theme of secrecy again is apparent here. Dr. Jekyll is trying to dismiss the subject of Mr. Hyde. Again, we've got links to context here about the Victorian society. They were very concerned about their reputation, so Dr. Jekyll doesn't want to tarnish his reputation, therefore wants to keep it a secret and wants Utterson to leave it alone. Utterson reflected a little, looking in the fire. I have no doubt you are perfectly right, he said at last, getting to his feet. Well, but since we have touched upon this business, and for the last time, I hope, continued the doctor, there is one point I should like you to understand. I have really a very great interest in poor Hyde. So notice how he describes him as poor Hyde, suggesting that he feels sorry for Hyde. Jekyll feels sorry for Hyde. I know you have seen him. He told me so, and I fear he was rude. But I do sincerely take a very great interest in that young man, and if I am taken away, Utterson, I wish you to promise me that you will bear with him and get his rights for him. I think you would, if you knew all, and it would be a weight off my mind if you would promise. So he's saying, Jekyll is saying you need to make sure that Hyde gets what he deserves, so with the will, and make sure you take care of him, which is crazy because obviously Utterson really hates the guy, and everybody who meets Hyde really, really dislikes him. But it's also strange, and again, this is a critical idea and an opinionated idea for those of you who are aiming for grade 8s and 9s. It's strange that Jekyll speaks about him dying, the need for a will, the fact that he might die. He's 50 years old. He's an upper class man that, isn't malnourished like, the poor. He's got good food. He's got he's wealthy, he's got everything going for him, and he's not unwell. So it's strange that Utterson doesn't seem to question why he's so concerned about the fact that he might die, and he keeps mentioning the fact that it needs to go to Hyde. His will needs, his money needs to go to Hyde. Why is he so? Why does he feel like he might die anytime soon? I can't pretend that I shall ever like him, said the lawyer. I don't ask that, pleaded Jekyll, laying his hand upon the other's arm. I only ask for justice. I only ask you to help him for my sake when I am no longer here. Utterson heaved an irrepressible sigh. Well, said he, I promise. Now this is really important, and this is the last little tiny bit that we're going to focus on. Each man in this novel seems to be isolated from every other, and there is a sense that this masculine world has been hushed by the needs to maintain social reputation. The men avoid gossip. So remember how Lanyon spoke about Jekyll, like his disgust for Jekyll or his dislike for Jekyll, but he doesn't uncover why exactly what it is that makes him dislike Jekyll, because it's this respect out of maintaining social reputation. And similarly, Jekyll does the same for Lanyon. He doesn't say anything, but there's obviously a dislike and a dispute between the two men, but they don't reveal why out of this maintenance of social reputation. The men avoid gossip, seem almost to avoid speaking completely about anything of substance, and while many of the men describe themselves as friends, their relationships are most defined by the things they keep secret from each other. There are many occasions in which one man will start to talk and then silence himself and keep the remainder, often the most important or personal detail, to himself. So the weight of unsaid information is really, really heavy in this novel. Okay. So this was a really short chapter, unlike the other two that we've explored so far. In the next episode, we will be analysing this really, really key chapter, the Carew murder case. If you have found these videos really useful, then please remember to comment, like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you.